Welcome to the Community of Excellence podcast, where lived experience leads the way. I'm your host Nil Suner, and together we'll be exploring powerful conversations at the heart of mental health, recovery, and peer support.
Hope for a generation, just beyond my reach, not beyond my sight. Hope for a generation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community of Excellence podcast for NHS and non-NHS peer workers in North London. I'm Nil Suner, Peer and Lead Experience Manager in North London Foundation Trust. Today, I have Angela South with me, a senior peer coach from Northwest Camden.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thank you.
We start with a short introduction of what you do and how you came to work in the field of mental health and specifically in lived experience.
Well, I'm a senior peer coach in my team. So I'm part of an MDT, which is a multidisciplinary team. So I work with a bunch of other professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, support workers, social workers, employment specialists. And together we kind of try and match the patient to the best possible person or service to help them with their mental and emotional needs at that point when they're referred. And I do that by, I suppose, building a relationship with someone, sharing my lived experience to a degree, and bringing all my skills to that relationship that I've developed over the years. So my background is actually in mental health. So I started working in the sector, broadly speaking, in 1998. When my son was about, how old was he? About 3. And I used to manage pubs. I'd been a hairdresser and I used to manage pubs. And then as a mum, I decided I wanted to be a psychotherapist. I went into training, and while I was doing that, I volunteered. I volunteered at Mind in Camden, and then I had a couple of clinical placements in Camden, and qualified in 2002, and then trained as a coach in 2006. But all through my life and all through that period and ever since, I've had, I suppose I'd call them mental health challenges, from bulimia to OCD to anxiety and depression, and struggled to some degree with, using alcohol to get through stressful periods. So yeah, it's when I saw when the job came up, I thought, well, that would be a good fit for me, because it's a mixture of everything I am. The skills that I've learned over the years, but also my personal lived experience of having a lot of what you'd call mental health challenges, or what I like to call mental health challenges. And the job allows me to mush all that up together and do something with it. So it's a great job to have for me, I think.
So, am I right to assume you get particularly peer support training with the job, with your current role?
Yeah, we're offered that at the beginning, and that was with a charity called With You. But their training is for peer support workers. We're peer coaches in my team, so there's some differences across the trust and across the peer work sector. It's quite a broad church. You can get peer advocates, peer coaches, peer support workers, and so on. In the trust at the moment, we're called peer coaches, or at least in Camden and Islington we were. Now that we're an LFT, I think there may have been different types of peers come over from that side.
Yeah, we did have peer support workers in crisis teams.
Yeah, okay.
There was a peer coaching service specifically on its own initially in Islington. And just for clarification, North London Foundation Trust started its life last year by merging of 2 trusts, which were Barnet Enfield Haringey and Camden and Islington NHS trusts. Yeah, it is not uncommon to come across with people who came to work in mental health before becoming a lived experience worker.
Yeah.
What was the transition like for you? What are the differences you would see? A lot of people come into work in mental health areas, be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a mental health nurse. A lot of people have their lived experience, and probably it's inevitable to bring their lived experience into their work.
Okay.
However, now this new
Yes.
profession is specifically lived experience work, be it as peer support worker
Mm.
or another title.
Mm. Yeah. So I think with me before, when I was, working as a counsellor or working as a coach, working with a coach less so because it's less heavily regulated. I didn't feel that I could express my personality particularly, and authenticity is one of my core values. So in that respect, working as a therapist, it wasn't aligned with my core values of authenticity and humour, because I felt that humour was often inappropriate in the therapeutic relationship. Not completely, but sometimes it just felt like I couldn't. I had to be very careful about using humour and authenticity as well, because I'm a little bit of an unusual person, some people would say. I had to be very careful with how authentic I could be in that role, in that professional role. So the main difference with me being a peer is that I bring all of me into the role. Obviously not completely uncensored, because that wouldn't be professional, but I can be, I think, more of my authentic self. I can bring more humour and light into the way that I work with the people that are referred to me than I could before, when I was a therapeutic practitioner or even just a coach or trainer. And that's what I like about it. That's what I like about it the best, is that I don't have to worry too much. What did I just say? Should I have said that? Was that the wrong thing to say? What might what might the repercussions be of me getting that tiny bit of that conversation not quite right,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of pressure on you as a sort of registered professional to do everything by the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that, that heaviest kind of regulation, the pressure of registration and so on. But when you're a peer, there's none of that. And you can just be you can be creative and you can work with someone from your soul. So if I'm really listening to someone very actively and I kind of urge from deep inside of me to move towards a certain way of working with them or a certain way of speaking with them, I'm more likely to be able to follow that and it to be fruitful than I could ever have done as a therapist, because I'm constantly checking myself all the time. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. That's not ethical. That's, when you're a peer, you can move towards doing some art. You can move towards going into nature. You can move towards doing all of these things. And it's just so nice to be able to do that and to be able to see the benefit of it, to be able to see that other person benefiting from you moving in that direction, which is a soul direction, for want of a better way to put it. It's using all of me to help another person rather than just the book learning in my head and the skills that I learnt before I became what I was. I wasn't using the whole of me in that job, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it. So when peer work started popping up and I started seeing this word peer and I looked more into it, I thought, God, that's the perfect job for me. That's perfect, because I get to be me, but I get to use all of this stuff that cost me so much money. My training cost me so much money and took so much out of me. I didn't want to not use it, but I knew I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to be a therapist. I didn't want to be that person, with a clipboard. That's the difference for me, is that I'm not really interested in furthering my career and moving up the career ladder and becoming a this or becoming a that. I did that already. I don't want to do that. I want to just be in a role where I can connect properly with other people in a creative way.
Probably a lot of our listeners will resonate with the experience. How long have you been in peer work now?
2 years and 4 months.
2.5 years. When you look back your experience in this time, has your relationship with your lived experience changed, or have you learned something new about yourself?
I don't think my relationship with my experience has changed. I think what's changed is that my skills have improved around what I share and how to share it for the maximum benefit of the other person. So I think it's easy for anyone, regardless of their background, when they come into this role, to kind of, for their sharing to be about them rather than about the other person. So we can all just wax lyrical about our own stuff, can't we, for hours on end, you know. Everyone can talk about it, yap on about themselves. But there's a real skill to sharing your lived experience in this role if you're going to be good at it. So I would say over the 2.5 years, I've refined what might be useful to another person, how I might deliver that information in the most concise way so that the session doesn't become about me. It's still about that other person, but I've shared a nugget, one of my golden nuggets, that's hopefully helped them to feel a little bit less isolated, or like they're not the only one that's ever experienced this, or, you know.
So would you say you have a framework or a system in your mind now how to use that skill, knowing when to, how to share your lived experience?
No, it's a lot more organic than that.
More intuitive, you would say.
There's a lot swirling around in my head and in my heart and backwards and forwards. Like I said, it feels to me when I'm with another person that there is a flow, and it always did actually, even when I was counselling, although I felt restricted. When I'm really actively listening to someone else, it's almost like channeling. Maybe it's channeling, comes up for me that I feel doesn't really have that much to do with a cognitive process or a choice. So yeah, it's intuitive, it's swirling around, and I go with what I feel, but just before it comes out, my head does a check to make sure it's appropriate. So I don't let everything that's swirling around just, lurch out from my...
So here's the thing. Is there a checklist then?
No, not really. I just use my experience to check, okay. I mean, you could think up one. I think up one right now. Okay, is this benefiting me or the other person? Is it appropriate? Is it going to embarrass them? Am I going to be embarrassed after I've told them? So check the comfort of it. Does it feel comfortable? So you could ask yourself those questions. I don't even do that. It's all intuitive with me. It's all about...
Yeah, every person has a different style.
Yeah, a
Absolutely.
feeling. And that feeling, if it's not okay in my chest, will stop the
Mhm.
disclosure, it will stop it. But really, I suppose bottom line, it's about, is this for my benefit or the benefit of the other person? If it's for my benefit, because I just, feel like talking about myself, then don't say it.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I didn't have a formal training in psychology or mental health before coming into this work. It was purely based on my lived experience and being lucky, being at the right place at the right time, and incredible people going the extra mile. So I always have been watching myself in sessions, if it makes sense. Not to the extent that would interfere how I would conduct a session, but it was like an additional discovery process. And then a couple of years back, I did a research internship, and it helped me to formalize how I observe myself. And I get a lot of questions, and I'm sure when you do trainings, you get a lot of questions about how do you know? How do you know what to do, what not to do? Because you're so used to the assumption that all other officially recognized mental health professions has a very strict code, and it's like a maths. It's like there's right and there's wrong. And of course that's not the case, but I come across with that perception, which I also carried myself until I came into the role. So I have been thinking about this, and I want to share my 2 bits on it, as you can tell, is that I find it very helpful to ask all of those questions you ask, but also as a kind of matter of practice. When I share something, especially if it's maybe not 1 minute or 30 seconds, but I feel the need to share a story, I usually explain the purpose, why I'm doing it in the moment to the client, and do they see the point? They always have the option of not to engage with that route, or they can put another perspective. But also it gives me a bit of more freedom to go with the flow, having that mini debrief at the end. Does that make sense? Do you think it was right to share this? Not every single time, obviously. There's like a natural flow to the conversation. Do you find yourself doing that? Because sometimes I get very interesting responses. Sometimes it can be, most of the times, reinforcing that, oh, really? I didn't think, when the more details, sometimes, the more details I share, it makes more sense.
Yeah.
That's why I developed this, because when I can give some unique perspectives that I had in that experience, then it resonates more. It's more meaningful sometimes talking about what was going through my mind in a specific moment rather than I was having chest tightness or those mainstream symptoms of anxiety. Everybody knows what experiences differently in a unique way. So sometimes, for instance, if I'm talking about, then I realized it was not it was not just because of I didn't have money at the time, but also I didn't have citizenship at the time. So that sense of security was threatened in a deep way, that kind of reflections.
Yeah. Yeah, I reflect upon how I coped with, I reflect upon how I solved a problem, whether that problem was, well, usually, the problem is how to cope with or manage a particular feeling, whether that's a panic attack or whether it's, a period of grief or whatever that might be. I share what worked for me. And that might be something that I do in terms of skills and knowledge that I learned from therapy or taught myself as self-development. Or it might be something that I know works as a practitioner that I've done with other people, but then I won't own it. I will say, well, there's this exercise, there's a grounding exercise called X. It works for some people. Would you like to try it? It might work for you. That's not really shared experience, but I'm still sharing something that I know that I think might help them. But when I've used something myself, then I will always say, well, would you like to know what's worked for me? If you're struggling with X problem, can I tell you what worked for me? It might work for you. It might not, but it might.
Okay, brilliant. Which brings me to a specific thing I want you to share in the podcast, if that's okay. We've done a training together recently. We've taken in part in a training, and I really love the section you talked about, which was about non-negotiables. So the official question is, what would your suggestions or thoughts you would like to share with someone who is just coming in to live the experience work, or maybe they haven't become a peer worker yet, but they're interested to become one? What should they consider? What should they be thinking about while doing the work?
I think they should be thinking about the seriousness of using themselves as the origin of their practice and how that can have a detrimental effect on a person if they're not very, very self-aware or fully aware of how they are mentally and physically on any given day. And further to that, if they then are unaware how to give themselves what they need on that particular day. As an example, so I take myself as an example, sometimes I have quite what I call quite heavy caseloads. What I mean by that is not lots of people, but lots of heavy material. And sometimes it can get a bit too much to carry for me. And so I'm kind of checking myself really on a daily basis. How am I? Am I all right to work today? How much weight am I carrying? How much more can I carry? How many more phone calls can I take perhaps from peers in crisis? How many sessions am I capable of? Just one today? Maybe not that one. Do I need to rearrange that one? Am I strong enough? So it's about having a level of self-awareness in relation to the job that you feel you're able to manage, that you can allow it to be malleable enough, elastic enough, so that you can move it around. You can stretch it, bend it, push it in and out of where it needs to be, rather than just have this job description. Right, there's a list of things I have to do with my job. I've got to do them. That's the end of it. That's not really going to work with this type of work because you've got your own vulnerabilities and you're carrying the weight of, the emotional material of the people that you're working with. When you actually start doing it, you start to feel the weight. If you keep carrying the weight, you will burn out. And I've seen it many times with people with robust clinical trainings. I've watched them from beginning to end burn out. I've burnt out at least 2 times myself. So the likelihood of burnout as a peer with a training is high enough, or you're vulnerable enough. So without that training in how to detach, let's say, for instance, because when you train as a counsellor, you're trained in how to detach, and you spend quite a lot of time on that. It was drummed into me for sure. So I think about peers coming in from backgrounds where maybe they haven't worked for a long time, or they've worked in a different sector for a long time. Maybe they've been, I don't know, an estate agent, who knows, you know. Then they come into this work, like, what a baptism of fire. How are they meant to understand how to carry the weight, the emotional weight of the peers they're working with alongside managing their own mental and emotional well-being? There's a lot there. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot of juggling you have to do, and you have to remain psychologically flexible and very, very self-aware. Like we were saying about the other day, about you were saying about constantly having a dialogue with yourself. How do I feel now? How do I feel about what I said 5 minutes ago? What do I feel about that conversation that I had yesterday? Am I all right with that? You know, and it's like constantly, monitoring yourself, I suppose, and making sure that you are operating at a level that is safe for you and the people that you're working with. And I've seen in the 2.5 years I've been here, I've seen peers struggling because we're still getting it right, I think, as an organisation. We're still going through that process organisationally. You know, what do we need to do? What isn't working here? What would work better? So we're doing that as a group. You know,
Yeah.
it's just really, really important. It's more important than it would be if you weren't a peer, because of the way that using your own experience creates vulnerability in you. The thing is, when you're registered and when you're a psychologist or a nurse, you're protected. It's like a glass wall, really. It doesn't mean you can't be hurt or upset by your work. Of course you can.
Burnout levels in their
Yeah,
professions
of
are
course you
also
can.
very great,
Of
I
course you
think.
can. But that kind of the rigidity and the like the robustness of that training gives you a layer of protection that you don't have as a peer.
Also, I think it's important to underline the difference in trainings. The training we get is more about how to use our skills and our knowledge that comes from our experience, rather than we already have the knowledge. It's about how to use that knowledge, which is quite different to other trainings we are mentioning here. Of course, if there's someone who's considering becoming a new peer practitioner or just started, I don't want them to kind of, this is not like, oh, fear for yourself. It's not about that.
No.
This is everybody experiences this, but it's important to have a system to protect yourself, because
Mm.
the thing I think makes us vulnerable is sharing the lived experience
Yeah,
and what it can
exactly.
open up. And it's the essential. Like there's
But
no way of
it's
going around it.
also it's the beautiful part of what we do.
Yeah. And very
So
rewarding as well.
it's an amazing job. It's a privilege, really, because you get to give in the way that you do.
So
But it's not for anyone that is unable to look at themselves and manage their own state. So it would be about, where are you if you think about recovery as a linear thing, even though it isn't, with a zero at that end and 100 at that end. If you think about recovery in that way, where are you on that scale? Obviously, you're not at zero because you wouldn't be capable of working. But if 100 is you at optimum level, like 100% functional, where are you on there? You know, and I would say you've got to be at least 50 to be able to contemplate working. So contemplate on using yourself in your work. You've got to bump up a little bit more towards that 100. You've got to be pretty well recovered from your mental health challenges to be able to do this work without them unwell.
it's not even, because there are people who doesn't believe in full recovery, and I understand their point. My perspective on it is I am at a point that is an acceptable level of recovery, because I have many long-term health conditions, not only
Yeah.
mental health. So I was trying to segue into non-negotiables, actually. So I really like that segment on non-negotiables for safe practice. Would you be able to run a short version of it with me here?
So we spoke about what are your non-negotiables, didn't we? So I picked that term to mean things that have to be in your life in order for you to stay well enough to be functional enough to do this work. And we actually started talking about self-care, didn't we? And then I kind of popped that phrase out because it reminds me of Instagram and bubble baths and things like that. And nails, you know. And it is all of those things. But if we want to go a bit deeper and go behind self-care, I think non-negotiables makes a bit more sense. So one of my non-negotiables, two actually, is getting too overweight and too unfit because I've got arthritis in my spine and long-term issues with eating and food. So if I'm in control of my diet and my weight is on the way down, even if I'm not skinny, if it's on the way down rather than the way up, my mental health will be okay. I know that. Also, if I'm exercising and strong, my arthritis is less painful. If I'm not in pain, my mental health is likely to be more robust. I'm likely to be on an even keel. So for me, my relationship with food and not overeating or restricting too much is a non-negotiable. That needs my attention. It needs to be at the top of my list. If it goes to the bottom of my list, I start to become more vulnerable to not being particularly functional. The same with the weight training. So I'm not a runner or anything like that. Not even a particularly great walker. I like a walk, but for me, it's picking up and putting down weighted items because that muscle tone in my body supports my skeleton, which then reduces my arthritis pain. So it's really very simple. If that's not at the top of my list, if I don't make it a non-negotiable, my body becomes weaker and weaker and weaker until one day I'll go out for lunch, walk round to Kentish Town High Road and fall over because my core strength is not sufficient enough to hold me up. That's literally what happens. I start to fall over. So weight training for me, that's why weight training is a non-negotiable. It's not because I enjoy it or I take pictures of myself lifting weights or any of that nonsense. It's absolutely essential for my well-being. I don't want to do it. I don't enjoy it. You know, I don't enjoy controlling my diet. I'd like to live on a diet of chocolate and beer like most people. But if I don't control my diet, things get out of control. Not quickly. Things don't get out of control quickly. This can be a slow drip, drip, drip. And then I'll look back and think, hold on a minute. I might look at a photo on my phone 6 months ago. I look great there. Why do I look so crap now? Because I've not been eating properly. You
Yeah,
know,
definitely. I think diet and sleep and
sleep.
movement
Yeah.
are
They're
three
non-negotiable.
things. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. So in an ideal world, we would watch all our non-negotiables in a perfect way and we would never become unwell, but that world doesn't exist.
Well, even with all your non-negotiables at the top of your list, you can still experience a bereavement out of
Yeah.
nowhere. You can
Yeah.
still experience a physical illness or get a diagnosis that knocks you sideways that you weren't expecting. Life is always going to happen to you. But if your non-negotiables are at the top of your priority list, then you're going to be as strong as you can be when life throws these things at you. Then if you weren't.
And it's again a great segue towards the end of the recording, not just yet, but the last section, which was I asked you, would there be a theme we might discuss? And grief came up. And I want to talk about grief in a couple of ways. One thing is, as someone who is doing lived experience work and kind of being vulnerable at work all the time as a fundamental criteria, something pops up in your life, expected, unexpected, like a bereavement, and then you naturally experience grief. A lot of people ask, like, what happens if I'm not well, or if, sometimes the concern is the condition popping up again or getting worse, but sometimes life events such as bereavement. Now, from your personal experience, how do you manage that?
I'm very honest with my peers. In terms of one-to-one work, I'm very honest with my peers. So they all know that I'm recently going through a grieving process. I've told them all. And it just the love and understanding that I get back is wonderful. And also I'm honest with my manager about how I'm feeling and about any time off that I might need. Or any, I suppose you might call them a reasonable adjustment, or just, can we ease off for a bit? Can I work at home for a bit? Or in my case, can I come in? I don't want to be at home anymore. I'm going to move into the office, please. So for me, it's about being honest about what I need in terms of one-to-one work and the office environment and my manager. But I mean, I've not got a huge caseload at the moment, but every one of them has just been lovely. Don't worry if you can't see me this week. Don't let me know when you're feeling better and ringing me or texting in, how are you, thinking about you. It's one of the lovely things about this work. I could never have done that as a counsellor. I couldn't have. I would have had to have sent a kind of formal message or something. I'm off sick. I'll contact you when I get back. I wouldn't have been able to allow myself to receive any kind of comfort from anyone that I'm working with in any other role, apart from this role. And it's really helped. It really has helped. It must be awful to go through grief in a kind of a job where you're very restricted and everything's very formal. And like if you're a lawyer or something, can you imagine going through a grieving process when you're trying to do a job like that?
Yeah.
Something that formalized and that intense. Yeah, that's how I've managed it, just by being vulnerable and being honest and asking for what I need.
And when it comes to the concept of grief, again, in my 7 years in this work, it gave me space to think about different types of grief and recognizing that, not only at work, but in my social life, which really had been helpful because obviously grief comes to mind if you lost a loved one or if you lost a job, something very clear cut or very big. It is expected to grieve. But also sometimes it could be due to you recognize you let some part of yourself go in time and you just recognize that, which took a lot of time for me to grieve over in the last decade. And it's a bit more unexpected, maybe unorthodox, if I can say the word.
Less
Think about
recognized.
grief. Yeah.
Less
And it plays in a role in mental health a lot, I think. I think there's a lot of unrecognized grief. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and particularly menopause. My own experience of menopause, 10, 12 years of that, was that a huge component of that was a loss of my youth, a loss of my ability to reproduce, understanding that I would never have another child, that was now not a choice anymore. That was taken away from me. I remember dreaming about giant tadpoles. How Freudian is that? And working in LGBT mental health at the time, and going in and telling my manager and him kind of analysing my dream. It was all about the loss of my kind of, ovaries and all the rest of it. Yeah. Menopause is a giant period of intense loss, and adjustment. This is me moving from my childbearing years, those years of vitality and productiveness, into, well, I don't know what it is, because it's too scary. Being an old lady, what am I going to do with myself? I can't knit, all that kind of fear about the future. But even losing your wallet will cause you to go through an emotional grieving process. Any kind of loss, you can feel a loss for the person that you thought you used to be. If you have a period of psychotherapy and you go through a big change, you can feel a sense of loss for the way things used to be.
Yeah, change brings a certain type of grief for me. It could be a change in my character or my personality or my life circumstances. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be a bad result necessarily. Sometimes I had that grief a lot in my younger years where you form a strong friendship with a colleague at a workplace and they move on. They go to another job. I found that very difficult in the
Yeah, I
past.
do too. Yeah, I do too. Because you spend so much time at work.
Yeah.
And you've got your person, haven't you? Your favourite person, and then they're not there anymore. It is like a grieving. It is a loss. I find loss interesting. And like I said to you the other day, ambiguous loss, living loss, that's very interesting as well, because you can't process that. The brain can't process it because that person could pop up at any time. And sometimes very often does. That's a really interesting process as well.
I think in my generation, I'm an old millennial. I was born in 85 and I'm becoming 40 this year, which might tell a lot about my questions. But I definitely, which also actually caused me moving from Turkey to the UK, was the loss of a worldview in a way. Like I grew up in the 90s. Everything was prosperous. Hope was high. It wasn't like a pink period. There was a lot of problem in the world, but we didn't know about all of them all the time, for instance.
Yeah.
And it changed right before I moved here in about 2011. and it has also a lot of things to do with the change in Turkey at the time as well. But I still held on to some of it to make that move and to stay in London and to make it in London. But once I came out of the other end, and I mean by getting the citizenship, for me, it was the end of a term. Then I started to grieve of all the things I held on, but actually weren't there anymore that gave me strength. And I see a lot of that in my generation. So people, this is a massive generalization for listeners, so they're aware. But I would say between the age, say 30 until about 45, I see that grief coming along in sessions or in my conversations in life. I see more of an anger when it goes over that, especially over 50. I see a persisting anger on, we were told these values were important, but we have been lied to.
Yeah.
I see that kind of anger. In the younger people, I see looking for any hope in a way to hang on, not even having it to start with, which is very sad, but also they're incredibly creative as well. Have you got any observations like that? Would these observations resonate
It's
with
very
you?
poignant. Well, I'm a Gen X and I do relate to the peers that I have that are my age and that kind of feeling of fatigue they have where they've just resigned themselves to the fact that nothing works as well as it used to do. No one cares as much as they used to. No one's as good at things as they used to be. No human beings answer the phone anymore. And that's just kind of like generalized grumpiness. I do relate to that. And something that happens a lot in our team is that older patients will say that they don't want one of the young practitioners. And they're a young team. I think I'm the eldest in my team at 56. All perfectly good at their jobs and very lovely people. But at least a couple of times a month, someone will say, oh, this person doesn't want to work with me. They want someone older. Where's Angie? Angie, do you want to? Yeah, I'll take them. Yeah. It's like we're just like getting a grumpy old club together. But it's not that they don't enjoy the company of young people or that they dislike young people. It's just they want someone else as cynical and tired as they are to be able to share that lived experience. Yes, I get it. I get how you feel because I feel it too. I'm flipping fed up with everything and worn out too. So let's just relate to one another and it's helpful to them. I'm careful not to collude with too much doom and gloom, but I also think that, a lot of the time people can come to the surface and they're feeling like people don't hear them. And they're constantly, framing what they've just said to make it more positive. And I do that. But the thing is, if you work with too many people that do that to you too much, you can feel like you're not being heard. You can feel like the original message that you want to get over, which is that you feel like you've been looked over, let's say. You want someone to really hear that.
Validation is a big part of what we do.
What's that?
Validation, I think, is a big part of what we
Oh,
do.
huge. It's huge, and the therapeutic benefit of even just one dose of validation. I'm a great believer in validating other people's experience, even if I might think, oh, that's unhealthy, or whatever my views might be
That's
on it.
their truth in that.
Yeah, I'll validate it, and then maybe we'll have a conversation later on about how much it's serving them, and would they like to maybe reframe what they're going through, the things they're saying to themselves, not what they're going through, but the things they're saying to themselves about what they're going through or whatever. But yeah, I think I don't tend to work with a lot of young people, and I suppose not many come through really, but I suppose what I notice about people maybe your generation and a bit younger is how much I think about my kids when I'm working with them, as my kids are 29 and 34. So when I work with people of that age group, I am aware of going backwards and forwards and comparing their experience to what my children might be going through. I do that a lot. And I think about the shared kind of cultural references and the impacts of their upbringings and, okay, does my son feel that way? Or I think I've heard my son talk like that. So I would do that kind of comparing and contrasting, because I can't really relate to them other than in a parental way. because of the difference in our ages. Whereas with people my age, I can really relate to them person to person. I can only really relate to younger people. I don't openly relate to them parentally because that would be inappropriate. But internally, I feel like my perspective is that of a parent of them.
Is there a best day or a very good day doing this work that you remember? A
Okay.
good moment, a good day.
Okay.
But before that, one of the things when I come together with other peers in many, many different platforms is how important of a support coming together with other lived experience workers, peer support workers, peer coaches, and others. And it's really invaluable having that camaraderie. And we most of the time work in a really isolated way. However, there aren't many places for us to be able to do that. But also, I feel like we don't seek it out actively. Like, if it
Yes, I
happens, it's
agree.
brilliant.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I know because I do that. Like, I know it's good for me,
Mm.
but I never find myself seeking out. It's always at the time of appreciation when it happens.
Mm.
How can we improve this? It could be, we don't make, sometimes group supervisions are not very attended, but it can be in the form of other networks. There's International Peer Leadership Network, there's Community of Excellence and other events. So
It's interesting that this question directs relately to the last question. And my answer to the last question came to me very quickly.
Okay.
So this is very interesting. So my answer to the last question is any day that I've been with my other senior peers and we've had protected time to just sit and talk to one another, which is generally once a month and has been for 2.5 years. But lately, it hasn't happened for all the reasons that we know about. I feel damaged is too strong a word, it's too dramatic a word. I feel affected by it because I'm aware that I value it very, very highly because I have experienced something from that coming together that has been hugely impactful to me. Now, that's my experience. But it might be that one or more other people that are part of that very positive experience that I've had are not having as positive an experience as me. And it will be those people that don't necessarily seek that experience out again. So I've got my perspective, and it's something about just because that's my perspective doesn't mean that everybody involved in this great thing of mine feels the same way I do. And that's something that I'm kind of getting my head around, is that I'm not sure that experience, I think I might value that more than everybody else that's involved in it. I think I might, which is not to do, well, there's no judgment in that statement, by the way.
No, I hear
But
you.
it's just something that I've thought about because we all have our different priorities.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is fine. But for me, that's a real priority. I will cancel anything to meet with my other senior peers. I will rearrange my diary to the point where it will give me a migraine if that's my priority. Getting together with my co-workers, even though they're not my co-workers, but that's a priority for me. But I've felt over the last kind of 12 months that it hasn't been for the other people in the group for whatever reason.
Well, one of the reasons is someone might be on maternity leave.
Yeah, there's all that. That's what I mean. Of course, your baby is going to be above in priority, your list of priorities above giving me the best day I've had all month. I think in order for us to want to seek out the company of each other, we need to have firstly had a very positive, meaningful experience with one another in order to want to repeat it. And I have had. So because I know how good it feels, and I've said this to you guys before, I feel like I've lucked out with you lot because I've had experiences with various colleagues over the 2 years, like everybody does in every job, that have left me feeling like I never really want to see that person again. And so if we are lucky enough to be in a group at work where we're all like-minded and we're really pinging off for one another and we're getting on really well, how lucky are we? Like that's pure luck that you're going to get a peer group like that, right? Where nobody gets on your nerves.
Yeah.
No one's annoying. It's just like you really, really look forward to seeing those 4 people every month. Like that's real good fortune. So I think that when you get together as a group with other co-workers, there's no guarantee that you're going to get on. There's no guarantee that you're not going to leave that space and think, I don't like what he said, or I'm offended by what she said, or whatever. So you've got to have that really positive experience to want to go back and repeat it. And in order to have that good experience, you've got to keep on trying different types of gatherings, right?
Mm.
Different types of groups. So you get different dynamics going, and then you find your little tribe and you think, right, that's where I'm getting my needs met. I want to go back to that again next week or next month. So yeah, I think you've just got to know how good that feels, which means there's a there's a degree of luck in being able to find a group of people that you really benefit from being around.
I hear what you're talking about. It's quite different for me. It's like not even about a set of people, but having a group conversation with my coworkers or colleagues or with people to kind of share our experiences. A couple of difficulties for me is it's really easy to dive into the problems because that's how our minds work. And also while we have each other, if we can find solution, we want to obviously prioritize that. But then when it dominates it, it can be really repetitive for me.
Yes.
When I hear about best practice is a very jargony term, but like they tried something, they discovered something and it worked well. That's really helpful. But I find it very difficult to find structured spaces. A lot of people want unstructured spaces. And then it's really difficult to, hit the optimum balance for everybody in the group, obviously.
Mm.
But also, I think we need some space for professional conversations, not a group supervision I'm talking about. I'm talking about, for instance, I love what Habits Collective does, International Peer Leadership Network, and I encourage everybody to check it out. And it could be one of the best group conversations I've been in, very mind opening, very validating, and people are all over the world. So you get to hear about someone's experience in Canada, in United States or Ireland or Australia. So it's validating on a different level as well because it's a global platform. But also I stopped attending because there's always something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that's where I was coming from. Like,
Yeah.
I know where I can be, and sometimes I want to be in person. Sometimes it's like I dream of a community space where you can drop in.
Me
You know,
too. Yeah. Yeah.
I really
I
dream of
would
that.
always choose face to face over remote. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like a peer center. You know what I mean? You would
Wouldn't
go
that be
for
nice?
training sessions, but also to speak to colleagues, somewhere to socialize and meet.
We're not doing enough of it at the moment.
Yeah.
And I have spoken to someone about trying to get something together, trying to get a group together, a space for peers to use in some way, but not for it to, to use lazy language, not for it to just be a moaning space or a complaining space, because everybody loves a good moan, especially the English. We love
I love
complaining. I
No,
love
no,
a
no.
moan.
I love a good moan.
But I
Love it.
also am aware of, the power of positivity, using positive words, positive language, and also sharing what we're doing that's going well, sharing what we're doing that's uplifting, and sharing how we do that, sharing how we uplift one another. And I'd like to do more of that. But the NHS is a slow moving beast, and I can say that I want to do these things, but then I have to wait for the beast to start to, wake up and think about what I've asked for. But yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, I just think that maybe what prevents people is that they haven't quite found that sweet spot where they've experienced something and thought, that was great, I can't wait to do it again. Like I have, with my senior peers, I always think, that's great, I can't wait to do that again. And I will always prioritise it. But there's a few gatherings I've been to where I've thought, I'm pretty sure I never want to do that again. So when it comes back around, I'm not going to prioritise it because I didn't really get that much out of it.
Okay. So on that note, let's do some reflections. What was this conversation for you?
Yeah, it was great. Very interesting. Yeah, it's been nice.
Is there anything that you would want to share with our audience?
I could be doing other things professionally, and I have done other things in the past, but I'm happy with where I am at the moment. I'm quite unusual in that respect, I think, as peers go. And I'm thankful every day of the good aspects of this job and the privilege to get to stand beside people on the same level as them, not as the person with the clipboard, but the same as them, and authentically be me and get paid for it. Like, what's better than that? You know, of course I have bad days, but it's a great job, and I would say to anyone thinking about doing it, it's not easy. You can have tough days, but if you're serious about it and you're open to taking help and support from the people around you, it's a great job. But no man stroke woman is an island. You can't
Yeah.
get into this and go it alone. You know, you have to accept that you're part of a bigger picture if you're going to be a peer, and make sure that you're open to working with your colleagues, your managers, and being vulnerable and being willing to not just give support to your peers, but to receive support from the machine that exists around you.
Definitely. Very
That's what I would
important
say.
points.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Angie, for talking to me today.
Pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners.
Yes, thank you to our listeners too.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Community of Excellence podcast. We hope these conversations help break stigma, build understanding, and remind you that healing is possible, especially when we come together. If you have been affected by anything in this episode, please know you're not alone. Support is available. You can speak to your GP or a mental health professional. For urgent mental health support in North London, contact the crisis line on 0800 151 0023. You can also call Samaritans anytime on 116 123. For free confidential support, you can text SHOUT to 85258. You can also call Calm Helpline on 0800 585858. Until next time, keep connecting and keep believing in the power of lived experience. This is more than a conversation, it's a movement.